Hello and welcome to Fluffy Dog. That's Fluffy DoG, home of the fluffiest furballs in all of 40K. Now, what is this show? This show is a show that is going to be airing twice a month, and we are going to explore different players in the communities who love their faction, and we're going to talk about why they love those factions, the lore, the fluff, everything from A to Z about their chosen team. So, what are we going to do? Who's with us today? We have the man, the myth, the legend, my co-host today, who just top 8'd LVO, which is not very fluffy, and I'm very upset about it, actually. He is the champion of all Adepticons and all of history. He's won everything known to man. I'm, of course, talking about Mr. Brad Chester.
See, I got so psyched up about our first episode that we did Tau that I took Tau to LVO.
Did that hype you up enough to want to do it? Was that the reason?
I got so hyped. I lured it up and I crushed.
You did take Farside.
Good. I did take Farside.
I appreciated that. We actually talked a lot about Farside that episode, and then I looked at your list and I was like, by God, he did it.
Told you.
Was he good?
I was inspired. One of our other guests here inspired me.
Yeah,
that was me.
That was you, man. I'm, of course, talking about he's back for a second week. He might just become a staple. I'm not sure. But I'm talking about, of course, guest user 1.
That's me. I'm guest user 1. I was born first name guest, last name 1. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm just proud. I'm proud you're back, man. I'm talking about Will Taylor, but he confused me last time. He didn't have his name on there, and in the moment I got flustered and blanked out. So, Will, it's good to have you on, man.
It's good to be back.
I think you might be the most knowledgeable lore guy in all 40K.
Ooh, I wouldn't go that far. There's definitely
you're gonna upset so many people. There's gonna be right now. It's gonna jump out of the seat when he listens to this. Goes, you fools! You have forgotten about me.
I would love that. I would love to start a comment war where people talk about how much more they know lore than anyone else. Like if that happens, that'd be a great thing for me. I'd be happy about it.
I think there's a specific guy in Australia who goes by the name Major Kill who might fly out to Florida and kill me.
You know what? I want to have him come over. That's a pretty expensive trip for Major Kill to make, so I'm willing for him to roll over.
There's a guy in Omaha, Nebraska, and he goes by Terrain Dave. I don't know his real name, but Terrain Dave is what he goes by because he makes all the terrain. He's really good. So I think there's someone out there whose name is like Lore John or something, and his thing is Lore. So if that person, I'm gonna start calling you Lore Will.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I have like niche pet people that I know a lot about, and that's about it. Well,
let's talk about one of those today.
Yeah, let's talk about
which is
the Death Corps of Krieg.
I heard those guys had a little bit of a falling back a while back.
Yeah,
if 2 or 3 years ago. Let's start from the beginning. In the days of yore, let's talk about the Death Corps.
Okay.
And why they are what they are today.
If you want to
They were also part, you got to remember, they were also, because we had talked about the Warhammer Plus, and we had some Death Corps in the Exodite series.
That's right, they did. I want to say that it was like a holdover of, actually, hold on, who worked on Exodite? Because I'm curious if it was the guy who does do Death Corps animations. There's a really awesome Death Corps animated thing on YouTube. Where the guy basically used Unreal Engine to recreate like a trench siege, a bunch of guys running across the trench and then killing a bunch of heretics, and it was all very similar Death Corps models to the ones that were in Exodite.
That's sweet. That's really cool.
I'll have to try to search for that while we're talking. But anyways, yeah.
What's your origin story? That's my big, because I'm very, like I told you before, I'm very Death Corps curious, but I don't know a lot. So I think that this is going to be a knowledgeable one for me, who's basically a complete noob to this faction.
They're pretty hardcore. I'm going to have Will carry the mojo for this. But when you're talking guardsmen, I mean, the Katie Stands guys will make some arguments that they're hardcore, but I think the Death Corps guys are, but they had a fairly shady past, so they're kind of making up for it. They're when your commissars, well, that's the funny thing. I mean, we'll get into the other, but I mean, like, their commissars literally have different roles than normal commissars do.
That's right,
because they're such psyched up to do stuff that they're non-Krieg people.
Before we go forward, let's give a general overview. So the Imperial Guard, where are they? Just like a completely bird's eye view, the Imperial Guard are basically the humans. They're like us if we were in 40K.
They're the best of us. Whenever, so that's like the old saying goes, when you have a normal guy with a flashlight up against, you know, all the horrors of the universe, what makes them, I guess, capable of taking down like a space marine or a tyrannid? And it's a normal person that goes through, maybe I want to say it's like 15 months worth of training while they're being shipped to their location, only to last, you know, 15 hours on a planet. But like they're supposed to be the whatever we consider our best people, our best, you know, fit people, our best shooters, whatever. That's what makes up the billions and billions of soldiers of the Imperial Guard.
That's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
that's where we stand. They're basically humanity's defenders outside of like the basic human dude. No,
They are literally the
genetic
bread and butter.
modifications.
There is
Yeah.
such a small amount. Like everybody thinks Marines when they think the Imperium's fighting force, but the Guard just is ridiculously more Guard than there is anything else. It's not even close.
When was it founded? Was it founded back before 30K, or where do we start with the Imperial Guard?
Does it start with the Solar Auxilia? I don't think it does it?
In the way that it is now, it really changed, to be honest, Blake, because we started with the Crusades, but they put together Titan Legions and everything else came. That one I'd have to look up. I'm ready for Krieg. I'm not.
Yeah, I can talk Krieg for sure, but
Yeah.
I don't know like where it starts with the Crusades, because I want to say that there were the Thunder Warriors, and then there was the whole Space Marine thing, and in order to shore up the, you know, shortcomings of X amount of legions that you have at your ready, you had normal humans that kind of worked with every Marine legion, and then ones that kind of, you know, you'd pick up and recruit.
Because every single planet had to have a planetary governor and then a defense force and all that. So they had the original Guard wasn't really the original Guard. It was more like the guys that were behind to do the planet after they left. But now it's just there's so many more Guardsmen than there is. Guard is ridiculously everywhere.
They're the human Tyranids. They just send little termagant dudes at you.
It's just kind of how we win. The Imperium wins because of just pure numbers and the fact that they have regular guys that are willing to take on things that they have no business taking on, which is why some of these stories are actually really fascinating, because you have me with a lasgun standing up to hive tyrants and things of that nature, demons from the warp. Is that
a 2024 project for me? The Bradchester Guard Army.
Stand firm, my friend. First rank, second rank. Let's do this.
So tell me, so where does Krieg sprout off of this? So what are we talking? How do they get their origin story?
So the world of Krieg is located in the Segmentum Tempestus, and what happened with them is about 1,500 years during the 40th millennium. So after the heresy, but before where we're currently at, there was a civil war. Essentially, the planetary governor decided to renounce the emperor and kind of go out on their own. And what happened since was the planet essentially, there was a fraction of the people of Krieg that did not want to renounce the emperor. They were embedded in a civil war. And so there was nuclear strikes that occurred all over the planet and basically created a total wasteland that they existed on. And so to be above ground was to be hazardous, and that's why they have the garb that they have. And even after the nuclear strike, there was at least 500 years, Terran years, of trench warfare between the people who were supporting the emperor and the people who renounced the emperor. And eventually, the loyalists came out on top.
And it's effectively a death world right now. It's considered.
Yeah, nothing grows on it, and that's actually that kind of leads into how the Death Corps were made, right? So every planet usually has some sort of tithe, whether it be mechanical resources, weaponry, food, and in some cases, when your most abundant resources people, your tithe is humans for the Imperial Guard. So with nothing to give to the Imperium as a whole, and with this sin weighing on the soul of the planet, the thing that the Death Korps tithe the most is human beings. They have a 90, I want to say it's a 97.5% tithe on people who grow on Krieg. So it leaves just enough for people to continue living on there, to give birth, to train new soldiers, to then send more off to the tithe.
Which is wild because that's so much different than so many of these other worlds. And they're just fanatical now with their devotion, which is crazy. They're Space Marine levels of fearlessness.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say their literal the regimental motto is in life war, in death peace, in life shame, in death atonement.
Is it because they betray, so they feel shame?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they literally, it's one of the things, one of the few things, and as I said, Will's going to carry this episode so hard, but it's one of the few things that I knew is that they have different commissars. Commissars are usually just standing there to shoot guys in the head so that no one runs away. In the Death Korps, they actually have commissars that are the go-between between Krieg guys and non-Krieg guys, because the Krieg guys are so willing to sacrifice themselves. So they will effectively do crazy actions because of that. They're actually looking for that heroic Valhallan kind of death, which Valhallans would be, of course, a different group of guardsmen, but you know what I'm saying. They want that like inspirational, noteworthy death in combat.
It's actually funny that you do mention that you use the word heroic. In the case of a Krieger, it's not considered heroic. It's considered your duty. You put yourself, you put the overall goal of winning above yourself. It's kind of almost in a way like the greater good. You put the greater good before yourself. In this instance, you put your penance, you put your worthlessness into gaining some sort of ground, even if it's like infinitesimally small. If ground is gained, your life was worth it. And it, like, I had a conversation with somebody about the Death Korps, because a lot of people on the internet like to look at them as, oh, they're suicidal. They are incredibly excited to die. They'll do whatever they can to end their lives. But I would consider them to be the most win at all cost faction. They are willing to expend everything as a resource. A bullet, a machine, a body is all the resource willing to be spent in order to achieve the overall goal of victory. They're so fucking cool. And
now, with the greater good comment, were you trying to tie this back into Farsight? Because I'm not going to allow that, Will.
I was tying it back into so it's funny, there is a lot of like banter between Tau and Imperial forces in some of the Black Library stuff, where they equate the greater good to fanatical, like the belief in the Emperor. And of course, every time a Tau does that to an Imperial, they're like, what are you talking about? That's disgusting. That's heresy even. I mean, like, there's similarities to them. That's why I threw it out there.
That's good.
I'm
But
gonna have to ask the first question here.
Sure.
Give me the most famous regiment.
So there's a couple, but I want to say that the 83rd Krieg Regiment is the most famous one. That was the one that was under command of Colonel Yurton. Colonel Yurton is famously the person who struck back against the heretics who renounced the Emperor in the original conflict of Krieg.
Rocking it out.
I mean, you could also go with, I want to say, the 143rd Siege Regiment. They're the one. No, hold on. It's the 88th Siege Regiment. They're the one who was the most infamous regiment who fought on Vraks. And Vraks is in my opinion, the most notable conflict that the Death Korps have taken place in. There's a whole Imperial Armor book about it. And if you can find that on the cheap, I would suggest purchasing it. It is filled to the brim.
No, that was the siege against Chaos led.
Yes. So the whole idea behind Vraks, Vraks Prime was an armory world, and there was a cardinal who more or less like was being whispered to by chaos, but he didn't realize it. And so he went on like a great faith crusade where he went to many planets and professed his faith and tried to get people to renew their faith in the Emperor and join him. And they went to Vraks and they holed themselves into this kind of impregnable city. And it was one of those instances where the world was too important to do exterminatus. And so the, I guess, High Lords who decided to figure out who they were going to send to take this guy out decided, hey, let's go with the siege regiment. We're just going to break their spirit, constantly bomb them, and then as soon as these rabble are broken, we're going to go in and take them out. But it turns out the people who were living in Vraks were so hopped up on religious juice that they held firm, and what was supposed to be like a months-long conflict turned out to be 17 years long.
I was just about to say, wasn't that was like the better part of 2 decades was the Siege of Vraks.
And there was like a bunch of people that participated in that. It wasn't just the Kriegers. Dark Angels showed up. There was an Inquisitor who ended up showing up. The Grey Knights participated. And on the Chaos side, there was Khorne and Nurgle demonic forces that showed up too.
Now, one of the things that, in my eyes, the most iconic unit, or like in that faction, is the Death Riders. Is that what they're called, the Death Riders of Krieg?
Yeah.
Like, so what's the situation with horses being on this world? Because that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
So they're not horses. They look like horses, but they're kind of like Wolverine. I know that's like a really weird connection, but they're basically a horse-like creature who has its bones removed and replaced with mechanical implants, and that's hopped up on pain suppressants so that the person who's riding it can hide behind the steed, and it just takes punishment after punishment, and just to get the guy to where he needs to go to deliver that frag-tipped spear into the heart of something. They're more for like scouting, but when they need to make a charge, they do.
That's freaking radical, and I love it. I need to buy that model.
Oh, dude, they're awesome. I've got 30.
And that's great. And the thing is I love that about them. And everything I've seen, and I've actually looked at some of the animation that you were talking about. I had to look it up while we were talking because I was like, I know what he's saying. Yeah. But I've seen a couple of them. And the craziest thing is that when you're looking at effectively a cavalry charge, when you're a regular guy, is so like beyond, like they're also super confident that it's going to work.
Yeah, well, they're fearless. It's not that they're confident that it's going to work. It has to work. If it doesn't work, then what's the point? It's actually fun. So like I'm sure both of you know just by looking at the basic soldier that they find their influences aesthetically from French and German World War I trench soldiers. Yeah, and so that's where a lot of these goofy units come to mind, like the Death Riders, because they were still using cavalry charges during World War I. So that's kind of the reason we're like, oh, hey, let's give them their own horses. But the idea is that's what they do.
What's on the tip of their spears? What you kind of briefly touched on it, but what do they have as their weapon?
So much like the Rough Riders of normal Astra Militarum regiments, the tip of a Death Rider spear is a frag grenade. When the tip hits something, it collapses and sets off the charge, and the frag grenade shoots off in the direction of the person that was on the other end of the tip. Once that's been expended, you can still use the pole to like smack people. And in Vraks, there is a cavalry charge into some Nurgle, either demons or Death Guard guys. And yeah, they kill some of them, and then they go down swinging these fucking metal poles until they like melt. It's a pretty gruesome way to go.
Which is crazy in the fact that they're, again, regular dudes that rock out. Yeah. Now, on the table itself, give me a couple of this. Give me a couple of units that are must-haves, and give me some story lore on those units that you have to have. Obviously, we've got the Riders, you know what I mean, that are amazing. We'll hit some more stories of them. But give me something that when you put this army on the table, what is it that is one of those go-to units that you have to have because of certain fluff for you?
So it's a bummer because the Death Corps no longer have like very unique rules any longer, because they kind of got rolled into the
Yeah, but
new
give
way
us
of
give us the
playing.
old stuff, because we had a
Sure.
lot
So
of them.
like,
Because this used to be its own side
yeah,
guard army that you could play.
yeah. So I would say there are two ones that stand out to me the most, and that's the combat engineers and the grenadiers. Grenadiers you can no longer purchase, but they are by far the coolest Death Corps models out there. Grenadier is basically the Death Corps' version of the Stormtrooper. They have the hotshot las guns, they have the extra carapace armor, and most notably, they have a skull on their mask. And the reason being is when you become a grenadier, and you don't become a grenadier by choice, it just happens. They read you the rites of death before you go out to do battle, because the attrition rate of a grenadier unit is like 92%. When you send grenadiers off to go a fight, basically none of them are coming back. And if they do, they immediately get promoted. So they wear that skull on their mask as a symbol of that is a dead man already. This person behind this mask doesn't exist. They're not coming back. The combat engineers, they are kind of similarly equipped. They have carapace armor, and their role as sappers. They blow up
Well,
enemy trenches.
real quick on the pause on
Yes.
that.
Sure.
For everybody with it, the Death Corps are siege specialists. So
Yes.
this goes into the whole. They are the siege guys. So
Yeah.
continue. Sorry, we didn't.
No, you're good, man.
We just decided to blow over that. That's like a big deal of why they have all this kind of things in the army itself, because they
Yeah,
are specialists.
They're big on making trenches, holding their own lines, and then doing the creeping barrages before they start sending guys over. And the grenadier is reminiscent of the stormtrooper during the trench warfare of World War I and kind of World War II. This like idea of elite soldiers that have a little bit more armor and a little bit more equipment to go and take over enemy trenches. In theory, it didn't really work very well, and I think that's why they factored that into the casualty rate for grenadiers. And then same thing with the engineers. It's counter trench warfare. They make trenches fast. They cut razor wire. They have shotguns that have 2 different rounds, and my favorite of their rounds is the Korp shot. Back in the day, they basically had plasma rifle shotguns. And then they had acid gas grenades that on the tabletop used to like wound anything that wasn't a vehicle on 2s, and they were AP2, I think, and they were flat 2 damage. So you could like pop these dudes up and then give them the order to throw all their grenades instead of one guy throwing a grenade, and you could just melt stuff with it. It was very fun. Those 2 units, in my opinion, other than Death Riders, are truly iconic Death Corps units.
So I love that about them. And one of the things that I really, really like is these entire worlds that are dedicated. I mean, Krieg itself, that's just what you do. I mean, obviously they're a little bit, I say they give them a little bit 5% more dedication because Psycho, but like you have these, that's just what everybody does. Everybody that you know is trying to become a soldier of the Imperium. And that's wild in and of itself, that an entire world, that's what they're in charge of. What are you doing, Krieg? Well, you're a soldier, and I don't know why else you would be doing anything else.
Yeah.
You're 3%er, man.
But it's more like 97%.
Yeah. Except
if you're
flip
part
that.
of the if you're part of the 3%, you're like running the government and training the newly born recruits on how to do the warfare that you're supposed to do. They share a lot with Cadia in that sense. When they are almost fresh out of the womb, they're training.
Or you're like Frank the Breeder. He's just a dude who pumps out kids.
So actually, it's fun that you bring that up. There has been they've like kind of hinted that the majority of the Krieg soldiers are men, and that they might use cloning to make their soldiers. They might use this thing called a Vita womb to make their soldiers. There's a good possibility that there is no real breeding going on.
Yeah, they are in a dead world.
Yeah. So
and they still managed to put out a ridiculous amount of soldiers.
So they've never like 100% confirmed how these soldiers come about, but they've hinted multiple times it's either through cloning or through, I guess, artificially making people.
Is that common with other Imperial Guard?
No, that is not. It's actually, I don't know if it's like looked down upon, but it's not the case. Like Cadians, the world of Cadia, people would make kids, and then a lot of those kids would be a part of the Guard. Even, I mean, they had their whole unit, the White Shields. Those were conscripted, 14, 15-year-olds that would be used as shields for the main soldiers. And if you survive that, hey, you're an honorary Cadian. With Armageddon, they just grab people that live in the gangs on Necromunda and other hive cities, and they push them into service. I can't think of other regiments and how they recruit, but it's just not the same at all.
So I'm gonna have to go to my favorite guardsman, because they did rescue him in one of the stories, which is my boy Caiaphas Cain.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, in Fecundia, he got shot down. Him and his sidekick. Why am I blanking on that? I'm gonna have to immediately look that up. Ferric. Yes.
We need the lore master in chat there. Please comment on it and yell at Brad for not knowing it.
I do love it, but that was on Fecundia. So he got shot down, and the Death Corps had to come in and basically grab him as part of that defense, because that was when the High Fleet Kraken was attacking there.
Oh, it's very neat. I don't read too many books, unfortunately, but for this specifically, I did actually read Dead Men Walking. That is one of the premier Death Corps books. It gives you another look into their society. And you've been talking a lot about commissars and how the way that a commissar works in the Death Corps is more of a liaison between two regiments that they have to work together. They're not there for morale, because Death Corps don't run. They rarely ever have to execute their men, so they're more there to be a uniting presence. And in Dead Men Walking, they've actually got a commissar in that book who does that exact that exact role. He's I can't remember his name, but he more or less, there's no way his name is Castellan. No, it's not that guy. But go ahead.
No, I was just.
It is Castellan. Yeah, it is Castellan. Castellan was there, and he had to keep the Krieg commander, the one who was in command of not only the Death Corps but also the planet's PDF, from executing the planetary governor like more than once. And it's really unfortunate, because like this guy had a family, this commissar had a family, and he ends up getting taken captive by these enemies who are worshiping the Necrons, who are rising up from the planet's underbelly as iron gods. And so they take him, they capture him and stuff, and he thinks, oh, it's gonna be fine, these guys are crack shots. And much like how the Death Corps treat their own soldiers, they treated this commissar the very same. They shot right through him to get rid of the enemy.
Oh, yeah, and it wasn't as good of his death as we could have had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was holding the guy there, inadvertently. So, I mean, it was a good way to go. Actually, it's funny, in that book, there are our protagonist, who is just this random dude, sees the Death Corps fighting against the Necrons, and one guy he gets shot and his body's starting to deatomize, and so he runs up and basically bear hugs a Necron warrior, and the guy behind him has a meltagun and fucking shoots through that guy and the Necron warrior just to get rid of him. And they are all basically every time some dude would run out of ammo, he would go and bear hug a Necron warrior just so that they couldn't move around and to get rid of them. Like, the Death Corps, hardcore.
What is, so here's something I didn't, this is kind of a sidetrack, but aren't the Necrons like this metal? So How are they so weak? Because they're like super weak in combat, right? Like I think a guardsman's like as strong as one in like in a hand-to-hand fight.
So they repair themselves. That's like the whole thing is like, hey, if they're weak, they get knocked out, they'll self-repair, and that's why the killing of them with a melt-a-gun was so important, because there's nothing to repair when everything is just slag. So that they were using a lot of melt-a-guns in that combat. The regular siege warfare was not working out.
Can't nanobot that liquefied bro.
I'm just thinking about like Blake Law running up to a Necron, like a metal dude, just hugging it and be like, you're gonna, like.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing: you're not part of Krieg. You got to psych up a little bit. You got to want it more, Blake.
I'm gonna psych myself up to join Krieg, man. I'm gonna go crazy. I'm gonna go full on crazy before next episode.
So what you're gonna have to do then, Blake, you're gonna have to get like a couple of guys, 10 dudes including you, and then you're gonna want to split the party, right? And have food in the center, just enough for half the team, and then you fight over it.
And the winner's Krieg.
Yeah,
exactly. Winner of Krieg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of winner of anything, let's get to I'm gonna go because Blake was like, I haven't even heard of Krieg before. I'm gonna go on. What for you, Will, is the go-to? If someone was gonna go describe Death Korps of Krieg in one battle, what is that one battle that goes down?
It's the Siege of Vraks. Specifically for me, I can't remember the exact conflict it was, but there's a fight where it's like the third or fourth push, and they had to get to the outer wall and blow up a bunker, I want to say, to create like a beachhead to move their forward operating base to that spot, right? And there's this guy who like most Kriegers don't really have like long names. They have a designation on what number they were that was born, and then like a moniker. In this case, this is Venner. That's his name. Hold on, there he is. And he was, I want to say he was a watchmaster, so basically a sergeant of a squad, and he's leading the charge, right? And he gets shot in the head, but his helmet protects him, and then he gets shot in the leg, but he keeps going, and he gets to the bunker and gets downstairs. They're clearing a bunch of dudes. He's losing guys left and right, and he holds this doorway against enemy flamers for like hours, and even like just pushes past that door, kills the guys there, steal their flamers, and then hold the line. And he holds it for 3 days. And because of his efforts, the Death Korps got their first beachhead to push into the inner parts of the city of Vraks, and they dragged Venner's he wasn't dead, but they dragged his body out, and he was still alive. This guy ended up being press ganged into helping the Inquisitor, who eventually lands on Vraks to cleanse the soul. And I want to say that he goes on to die against some Necrons in the Orphean War, but he's in 2 of the Imperial Armor books, and he was actually the named character you used to be able to take.
No, dude, that's crazy. I love some of the super crazy stories about that. One of the wild things about it is the Death Korps have actually been in a bunch of the biggest wars. Like they were part of the Third War of Armageddon with Gazgul. They've been against the weird thing is that a lot of the Guard specifically fight against one type of thing. They're known for it. They fought against the Orc Wars. They fought against Tyranids and stuff like that. The Krieg guys have actually been all around everywhere, and they're a little bit different of that, as they fought in so many different fights, as in they fought against Tyranids, they fought against Necrons, they fought against Chaos. So they actually fought against Tau.
Oh, did they? Oh, that's right, in the Exodite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was part of the Taros campaign.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they worked with the oh my god, the Lawrence of Arabia regiment.
Yes.
Italian?
The Talarn.
Talarn, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Bullshit.
that's the thing is like they're a little bit different than a lot of, and there's others that have done it, but like a lot of Imperial Guard famous regiments and things of the nature have been in just they fight this one thing because they fight at one side, but the Krieg, the Death Korps Krieg, have been against all of these different Xenos and different threats and chaos itself throughout their stories.
They actively ask for the worst war zones so that they can be martyred in glorious combat, even though, once again, they don't see it as glorious. They just see it as necessary. So it's actually cool.
So-
one of the things that they do is whenever they receive medals, they don't believe they deserve medals for bravery, heroism, calls beyond or actions beyond the call of duty, because that's expected of them. They just don't care for it.
That's just wild in and of itself.
Yeah.
Let's put a bookmark here for a blank bookmark for the Talarns, because they're my favorite looking Imperial Guard.
Oh yeah, cool.
So let's do an episode down the road. Maybe not next or one after that, but down the road.
Bookmark, love everything about that.
Yeah, because those models are sweet. They look really cool.
I don't know too much about them, but I know one story that was in the 8th edition Guard Codex that makes me really hate Grey Knights. I hate them so much. They're such dickheads.
You know what? I have to know this. We're doing this. It doesn't matter. It's part. I know it's part. It's Death. It's Death Korps Krieg.
Death Korps Knight, but we'll talk about. Okay.
Let's
sure.
get us. We need a side. Come on. That was a passionate rant right there. We got to get.
So there was a conflict on what is essentially another desert planet, right? That Nurgle was corrupting the planet, and so the Talarn were sent there, and they were confined to their vehicles. They had to sit in their tanks. They had to sit in the Lumen Russes and the Chimeras and stuff, right? Because if they got out of the tanks, they would immediately die of cancer because the radiation was so bad. But they're like the hit and run, tank regiment, or that's what they do. They do hit and runs, right? So they partnered up with the Grey Knights to knock out this Nurgle corruption. Well, they win. The Talarn and the Grey Knights, they win, but because the Grey Knights are really secretive and you can't let a lot of people who've been around chaos corruption survive, the Grey Knights immediately turn their guns and kill all the Talarn guys, and then carved their names as heroes into the Grey Knight armor. It's fucking stupid. I really hate Grey Knights. Just let them live. They're normal dudes. They got the job done against insurmountable odds. Just let the guys live. It's so stupid.
They killed Blake, Brad, and Will.
Yep, they got us.
Fuck you, Drago. I'm glad you're in the warp.
So stupid. Do you guys want to know how a Death Korps reaches marshal status?
Yes, more and yes.
Okay, so it's kind of hard to climb the ranks as a Death Korps. You start off as a normal dude, and then if you survive your first engagement, which not a lot of people do, you become a watchmaster. You become basically a sergeant of the squad. You survive your next engagement. Hey, look at that! You're a grenadier. You survive as a grenadier. You go back as a watchmaster for a grenadier. You survive that. Guess what? You're promoted into the Death Rider. The cavalry bit, which comes with its perks because you don't have to wear those terrible normal shitty boots. You can actually wear the rider boots that are comfy. You survive that, you become a sergeant. Survive that, you get to be put into a command squad. Survive that, you start getting the ability to command a regiment. And then if you survive that, you become a marshal. And as the guys survive, they pick up little bits and pieces from the equipment that they previously worked with. When you go all the way to the top of the line, you get to keep those riding boots that you were given as a Death Rider. You get to, what is it? The Administratum gives you one of those nice jackets to point you out as a distinguished figure, even though it offers no
protection whatsoever.
Exactly. And you have to have your medal showing, even it's basically they're forced to wear this jacket. You get the cool helmet. You get a gas mask that's lighter and doesn't have the tube because you're not supposed to be in engagements. So you have canisters instead of the attachment to either the bag or the back of your armor. Life is kind of easy at the very top. But the person who is wearing all of that only wants one thing, and that's atonement, and they still have yet to get it. Kind of like a Slayer from dwarves.
Oh, as my people, as a honorary dwarven master here,
Oh,
I'm very close to the ground. But and I love that because that is how we'll go into the fantasy players. The better of a Slayer you are, the more angry you are that you didn't reach your death, because you go Troll Slayer, Giant Slayer, Dragon
Slayer, yeah.
Dragon Slayer kept going up, and you're effectively like, why can't I die? This is nonsense. You're like, you got too good, you can't get the death that you're looking for, which is
I have an Adepticon team idea based on the Deathcore philosophy. Actually, I think all go buy the nicest UGG boots we can get, and we just wear nothing but UGG boots, and we do a Death Riders of Krieg cosplay.
Only if you actually ride a horse into Adepticon as part of the cosplay.
We're not wearing pants. We're not wearing pants. No shirts. It's just like a I don't know, like a Krieg thong of some sort, and then
Krieg thong.
Krieg thong and UGG boots.
I love that this is where we hit the episode. We hit pretty hard, and then we as we start to tailor off, we go into Deathcore thong and UGG boots. I feel that people are going to message us and say, I will give you money not to do that. Move on.
There's no stopping this train now. I see it Will's eyes. He's in.
Oh no, man. I don't know if I can do it, dude.
Well, it's a winning idea.
Let's go, with one more on this, because I want to hit the stories. We had Jordan, we had the 83rd. Give me one of the other regiments and give me a good story, which is one of those when you're putting that army together, you're painting and you're getting your Deathcore ready. What's one of the regiments that you're thinking of when you're getting your guardsmen ready for tabletop?
So that's the unfortunate thing for me is whenever I do my own stuff, I base it off of something that isn't in the 40K world, nothing that's inspired by anything from Warhammer. I want my dudes to be my own guys. If I had to, though, I want to say it's the 143rd Deathcore Siege Regiment, and it's just because I like the colors, not necessarily because I like what they accomplished, but they were a part of Vraks. I want to say that they had the nice gray and white colors. For me personally, my Deathcore painted like the Helghast from Killzone. Have either of you guys played that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed, I have.
Yeah, that game's sweet.
The game's cool as fuck, and I love the just the muted color aesthetic with these bright glowing red eyes, and the governments are kind of the same. They throw their people into the meat grinder for minimal gains.
See, it's funny because you said the legendary guys that started it, but when I thought the Deathcore,
the 83rd, yeah,
I go to the 186th, which are the guys that were as a lot of engagements with the Necrons where they find out that they're accidentally on a tomb world.
Oh yeah,
and they just keep getting in engagements as the tomb world is awakened, and so
these guys, okay,
yeah. It's just, I don't know why, but that's like one of the first things that I saw when I was introduced to these guys.
I didn't catch it. The 186 is the regiment that takes place, that participates in Dead Men Walking. I want to say that the Krieg, the book that is named Krieg, probably has them in it too. It's supposed to be like
they've been in a lot of different,
yeah.
But they've been in a lot. That is because I've been in 40K forever. But it's one of when I first got it, the guys that I learned to play with were a bunch of guard players. So I had guard lore from back then, and they had specific, the regiments of this is supposed to be the 186 and things of that nature. But it was pretty wild because some of these guys have been in like some pretty wild legendary engagements. Mm-hmm. And even though they're just, fearless guys, they've had so many people that have fought in so many different crazy engagements. it's even though they're striving basically for that honor, I guess not honorable death, duty death. So many of them could be considered crazily lucky too, though. You've had all these
Yeah.
guys that just are doing whatever it takes, and then they just keep pulling out over and over again. You're like, I don't know if you've got the ultimate lucky rabbit's foot or what, but you're still alive.
So I think that's like that's a good way of characterizing Venner and Colonel Tyborg. Some of these guys who have survived like multiple battles. Like, what was the quote in a war of where the what is it, in war where the younger dead fear the old, or something like that. What is that quote? There's a quote basically saying like you should be afraid of older people when there is wartime because they clearly have seen some shit and they're the most dangerous people to deal with.
Was it? There's also the quote. It's like, "What hard times breed soft people."
What
is
like
it?
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard
Yeah,
times
whatever.
breed
I
hard
messed
men.
it up.
Hard men breed soft times. Soft times breed soft men. Soft
Yep,
men
that's it.
breed hard times.
Hard times.
Yeah.
And there's none of that in Krieg, though. It's
No,
just hard
all
times.
hard times.
Hard times.
It's
breed
just hard times builds hard men, and there's more
Yeah.
hard times. grab a gun, you'll be
Grab a
okay.
Actually, so have any of you guys played Darktide yet?
No,
I have
here's
not.
awesome,
I want
though.
to on that. Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember which Forge World it is. I don't want to say it's the Artemia Forge World, but basically the lasgun pattern that they have is in Darktide, and it's really neat. It has a bayonet, and it has an overcharged ability where if you hold down the trigger, it'll punch through harder armor, carapace armor, essentially. And it's never been like hinted upon in the lore, but I thought that was really neat addition to just another neat little layer to the Death Corps, where of course they have weapons that they can overheat at the detriment to their own lives just to get an iota of
just for spite, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
Because fuck you. because that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, this gun just melted in my hand. Yeah, good to hear. I killed that guy over there, though.
He's
Well,
done.
you kind of touched on it to start the episode, or throughout the episode, actually. But what if someone was going to be like, I want to learn more? What would be your best resources? I'm going to say probably Imperial Armor books are good ones for the Death Corps.
So the Imperial Armor book, the Siege of Vraks, the one that has rules for both the Death Corps and the Lost and the Damned, is what I found to be the quintessential Death Corps book. It has bits and pieces on the founding of the regiment. It's got neat little tidbits on how they're how they're armored, how they're designated, what their mentality is. It even has like the bits and pieces of a Death Corps soldier kind of has like dark humor. That's their whole thing, is like fatalistic humor. So there'll be a hill that a bunch of dudes ended up dying on, and they'll just call that Death Hill, and they think it's funny. Like that's how they get by and whatnot. It talks about just all the different facets of the army, long lost units that they no longer print, like the quartermaster. Everything that you want to know is in here, and how they're even equipped. Yeah, man.
I love that in the game, though, because you get people that are very, very fluff oriented and historical from 40K. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of people, like the individual stuff that you're talking about right now is a big deal when you look very closely at people that are great artists with that, and they'll make sure that they have the proper designations on each and every squad depending on who they are. There's some very nice armies out there. That's where I wish we did some video on that, because I do have pictures of some like amazing Death Corps Krieg armies.
So two things. One, to comment on your thing. One of the ways that they designate a regiment, like what the regiment's colors are, not necessarily the garb, but there's this little pattern on the left lapel of their trench jacket that has two colors. Normally, like in this case, for what is this? This is from the 143rd Siege Regiment. this guy here, he's got a red triangle that is outlined in black, and that's the regiment's colors. And there are people that I've seen, I can't do it because it's way too small of a on the model, but they'll paint the regimental colors on the left lapel of the jacket. It's very cool. And if you play against somebody who has that, they know their stuff. Also, their weapon pattern is Lucius. Their stuff comes from the Forge World Lucius.
Ah, that's cool.
I'll say Blake knows some of those because you have Lucius pattern stuffs.
Yeah.
Do indeed. Well, what else? You got anything else for us, Will?
The last thing that I could talk about is the quartermasters. That's like a Krieg unit that I didn't think about, but does come to mind. Just because I don't think that they've had rules since the conversion to 8th edition. But a quartermaster.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't think they have anything modern because I don't remember them at all in the last 3 editions, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so a quartermaster, their whole role, they're kind of like a non-combat unit, but what they do is at night, when the enemy is sleeping and there's very few people that are on Overwatch, a quartermaster will take his couple of servitors out to the battlefield, look for pockets of dead guys, and they'll either find kind of wounded Kriegers and patch them up. If they're too far gone, they'll read the rites of death to them, and then they'll shoot them. And then what they do is they collect all of the gear off the dead bodies, and they get patched up and sent back home so that they can gear up the next wave of Kriegers. It's very reminiscent of what they were doing in World War I Germany, where they would collect the coats and the gear from dead soldiers and try to stitch them up as best they could and hand them out to new recruits. One of the best examples is All's Quiet on the Western Front. If you want to watch a movie that feels like Deathcore, go watch that movie. It's fucking awesome.
Love it.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty sweet. Well, guest user, it was great having you on. Guest user 1, sorry, I gotta get your full name there.
Whoa, just say.
It's great to be on.
I'm looking forward to the next one we bring you on. We'll find we're gonna tap into your other love, and we'll get you on another episode here shortly.
Fantastic. So, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Join us next time. Make sure to check out all of Death or Glory's awesome content, and we are out.